The night was still when Sarah slipped back into the house. The storm clouds had returned, hanging low and heavy, pressing the air with the weight of something that felt like fate. Her father stirred in his chair as she entered, the firelight dancing across his weathered face. He looked older than she remembered, his skin rough, his eyes sunken, his beard more gray than brown. For a moment, she almost turned back. But the locket in her hand felt like a pulse, a truth she couldn't keep buried any longer. "Pa," she said softly, her voice trembling but clear. He opened one eye, grunted. "You're up late," he muttered, reaching for his whiskey. "Had to check on the barn," she replied. A stranger came through. That woke him up. He straightened in his chair, suspicion sharpening his features. "Stranger?" "An Apache," she said. The word hit him like a gunshot. The old man's hand froze on the bottle, then slowly reached for his rifle. "Where is he?" His voice was a low growl, more beast than man. "You don't need your gun," Sarah said quickly, stepping between him and the weapon. "He's hurt, he ain't here to fight." Her father's jaw tightened. "They always come to fight." His words were venomous, heavy with years of hate. Sarah's heart pounded. He had this. She held up the locket. The firelight caught on its silver shell, making her mother's initials gleam. Tom Whitlock froze. His face turned pale. For a long, painful moment, the room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. "Where'd you get that?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "From him," Sarah said. "He said it was Mother's. Said she wasn't killed by the Apache, that you knew the truth." Her father rose slowly, his boots creaking against the floorboards. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell me," Sarah shot back, tears welling in her eyes. "Tell me what really happened." He turned away, running a trembling hand over his face. "She trusted them," he said bitterly. "Your mother believed she could make peace. But those devils took her from me." "No," Sarah said, her voice rising. "It wasn't them. He told me it was white raiders, the same ones who burned our neighbors out that spring. You blamed the Apache because it was easier than facing what really happened." Tom spun around, fury and anguish colliding in his eyes. "And what would you have me do, Sarah? Ride after ghosts? Watch the town laugh at me for trusting her?" He slammed a hand on the mantel, making the locket swing from her grip. "She chose them over us. Over me." His voice cracked, breaking into something fragile and hollow. "She died for it." He sank into his chair, breathing ragged. The truth hung between them like smoke and sorrow. Sarah backed away, tears spilling freely now. "You didn't just lose her," she whispered. "You buried her twice, once in the ground, and again in lies." She left him there, broken by the firelight, and stepped out into the cold night. The wind howled across the plains, carrying with it the distant cry of a coyote. As she made her way back to the barn, her hands trembling, she knew what she had to do. Caden had nearly died to bring her this truth. Her father's hatred had already cost them everything. It was time to end it, one way or another. The morning sun rose sharp and unforgiving, casting long shadows across Jacob's ranch. The woman, her name, he learned, was Taya, stood by the corral, her tall frame steady though her ankle still bore the mark of the fire. She was silent, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Jacob followed her gaze and saw what she had seen hours before he did: riders. A dozen of them, cutting through the dust like ghosts, each armed and painted in the crimson of the Apache war bands. The air felt heavier with each hoofbeat. Jacob's hand hovered near his rifle, but something in Taya's stillness told him to wait. When the riders finally stopped, their leader dismounted, a man whose presence could silence the wind. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined like weathered stone, and his chest bore a necklace of eagle feathers. His eyes locked on Taya first, and then on Jacob. The two men stood 10 paces apart, the space between them thick with history neither could name. Taya stepped forward, her deep voice carrying the weight of both daughter and warrior. "Father," she said in English so Jacob could understand, "this man pulled me from the fire." The older man, Chief Nantan Vosh, leader of the Red Mesa Apache, turned slowly, studying Jacob like a judge at a hanging. Nantan spoke in his native tongue, sharp and rhythmic. Taya answered him softly, her voice both defiant and pleading. Jacob couldn't understand the words, but he could read their meaning in her face, pride mixed with fear, gratitude laced with guilt. Then the chief dismounted and approached. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in broken English, he spoke, "You save my blood." He paused, eyes narrowing. Why? The question hung like smoke. Jacob swallowed, his throat dry. Because she needed saving, he said simply. Fire don't ask who you are before it burns you. The chief's face remained unreadable, but his warriors exchanged glances, some with respect, others with suspicion. They stayed at the ranch through the day. The Apache horses drank from Jacob's trough, and the scent of smoke still clung to the woman's hair. Taya helped Jacob repair a broken fence, moving with quiet strength that made him forget the tension hanging in the air. Her father watched every motion. By sundown, the chief spoke again. You saved her. But when man saves life, he also takes part of its path. That path, sometimes not meant to cross. He turned to leave, his words carrying a warning as much as gratitude. Tomorrow, the mountain decides what stays and what leaves. That night, Jacob couldn't sleep. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the echo of drums from somewhere deep in the hills. Taya sat by the fire, staring into the flames as though she could read her fate within them. My father thinks saving me was not mercy, she said quietly. He thinks it was a sign. Jacob frowned. A sign of what? She turned her gaze to him, eyes dark and ancient as the desert night. That the spirits have chosen you for something you don't understand yet. Outside, a coyote howled, long, mournful, and full of omen. The third night came faster than Emily expected. The farmhouse no longer felt like a home, it had become something else, something watchful. Daniel had gone to the police that morning with photos of the massive footprints, but the officer barely looked at them before shrugging. Coyotes. Maybe a trespasser, he'd said. Fog can make things look strange. That phrase, fog can make things look strange, echoed in Emily's head long after they got back. She knew what she'd seen, the outline of a figure, tall and still, its face hidden by the mist, and the way the dragging footsteps had circled their house like a predator testing the fence. By nightfall, Daniel decided to check the attic. It was the only part of the house they hadn't explored since moving in. He said he wanted to make sure no one, or nothing, had been hiding up there. Emily stayed downstairs, listening to the hollow creak of each step as he climbed the narrow staircase. Dust sifted through the air, and the sound of old wood groaned with every footstep. Then silence. After a long moment, she called up to him, "Find anything?" No answer. Her heartbeat quickened. Just as she reached for the bottom rung of the ladder, his voice came from above, "Just boxes and, wait," his tone changed, quieter now, uncertain. "Emily, there are boot prints up here." The air turned cold. She backed away from the ladder as Daniel climbed down, his hands trembling slightly. "They're fresh," he whispered. The dust was disturbed, and they're the same size as the ones outside. They locked every door and window again, trying to calm themselves, but the silence that followed was oppressive, heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath again. When they finally went to bed, exhaustion dragged them into uneasy sleep. Sometime after midnight, Emily awoke to a faint noise above them, slow, deliberate creaks pacing back and forth in the attic. At first, she thought it was Daniel getting up, but when she turned, he was still beside her, eyes wide open. He'd heard it too. The footsteps continued, steady and measured, as if someone were walking carefully across the attic floor. Then came the 3 knocks again, this time directly above their heads. Knock. 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 Emily covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Daniel grabbed the flashlight and crept toward the ladder, but as soon as he pulled it down, the knocking stopped. The attic fell dead silent as he climbed halfway up, shining the light around the dark space, and for a second, Emily saw something glint in the beam, a metallic reflection in the far corner, like a piece of glass or a mirror. But when Daniel pointed the flashlight there, nothing was there anymore. He came back down, pale and shaken. "It's empty," he said, but his voice cracked slightly. They left the ladder down that night, afraid to close it, afraid of what might happen if they trapped something above them. Neither of them spoke again until dawn, when they noticed a new message scrawled across the attic door in fine black dust: "I never left." By the 4th night, sleep had become a memory. Emily hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken much either. She sat by the living room window wrapped in a blanket, staring at the yard where fog now gathered every night without fail. The attic ladder still hung down like an open mouth, gaping into darkness. Daniel had insisted on keeping a light pointed at it, though the bulb flickered unpredictably, sometimes dimming just when they both looked away. The air inside the farmhouse had changed too, stale, charged, like before a thunderstorm. Even when she stood still, Emily swore she could feel something moving behind the walls, a slow dragging, as though the house had a heartbeat. That night, as Daniel tried to get a few hours of rest on the couch, Emily heard it for the first time, a whisper. Soft, low, and drawn out, like someone exhaling her name through a mouthful of dust. M-I-L-Y, she sat up straight, pulse hammering. The sound seemed to come from the wall behind her, near the old wooden panels. She pressed her ear against it, her breath trembling. The voice came again, clearer this time, closer. Help me, please. The words were barely audible, as though spoken through thick insulation. Every instinct told her to run, but her feet wouldn't move. She woke Daniel, shaking his shoulder violently. He listened, at first dismissive, until the whisper came again. They both froze. This time, the voice wasn't pleading, it was mimicking. Help me, please, it repeated in the exact tone and rhythm of Emily's voice. Daniel's jaw tensed. He grabbed a crowbar from the garage, his movements sharp and mechanical. Something's in the walls, he said. Maybe a speaker, maybe someone hid something in there. He started prying the wooden paneling loose near where the sound came from. But behind the wall, there was nothing, no wires, no hollow cavity, just dense insulation. Yet even as they stared, the whisper came again, this time from the opposite side of the room. Emily, they tore open 2 more sections of wall before realizing the sound was moving. It drifted from one corner to another, circling them. The lights dimmed, the air grew colder. Daniel turned off the flashlight to test something. In the darkness, the whisper stopped. For a few seconds, all was silent. Then came the sound they dreaded most, 3 knocks. Knock. 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 But this time, the sound came from inside the wall itself, right behind Emily's head. She stumbled backward, her hand brushing against the wooden panel. It was cold, wet, like the condensation on glass. When she pulled her hand away, she saw dark streaks smeared across her palm. It wasn't water. It was blood. Daniel yanked her away and aimed the flashlight toward the stain. In the beam's shaky light, something new appeared on the wall, 3 handprints, long and distorted, pressed into the wood from the inside. The prints began to drip, streaking downward like tears. They stood in paralyzed silence as the whisper returned one final time, the voice now deep, hollow, and unmistakably angry. You shouldn't have opened the door. By morning, the walls were quiet again, but the damage remained. The handprints, though faded, had not disappeared. Emily sat in the kitchen staring at them, barely able to eat or drink. Daniel paced the floor, his exhaustion now laced with determination. He wanted answers. Something's under this house, he muttered. I can feel it. His voice was steady but hollow, like he was trying to convince himself more than her. The farmhouse had an unfinished cellar below, accessible only by a small trapdoor behind the pantry. The landlord had told them it was unsafe and had nailed it shut years ago. Daniel fetched a hammer. If this place is haunted by something, he said grimly, then I want to see it with my own eyes. The trapdoor was older than the rest of the house, thick oak wood with rusted hinges, the kind of construction that looked hand-built long before electricity ever reached this part of town. Daniel pried it open, dust rising in slow swirls as the smell of damp earth and rot filled the kitchen. A black void gaped beneath them, swallowing the flashlight beam almost entirely. Emily stood behind him, gripping the doorframe so hard her knuckles whitened. Don't go down there, she whispered. But he was already halfway down the creaking ladder, flashlight clutched tight. The sound of his boots on dirt echoed faintly, then stopped. There's something here, he called up. A hollow space under the foundation. Emily waited, trembling, listening to the sound of his footsteps exploring below. Then silence. Daniel, she called. No answer. The quiet stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, she heard a scraping sound, a dragging, rhythmic scrape. Then his voice again, weak and distant. Emily, come look. Against her better judgment, she descended the ladder. The air grew colder with each rung, thick with the smell of mold and iron. Her flashlight swept across uneven earth and the decayed remains of wooden beams. Then she saw what Daniel meant by hollowed out. A pit had been dug beneath the house, deep, circular, lined with old stones like a well. It went down at least 10 feet, maybe more, vanishing into blackness. Inside, something pale jutted out from the dirt. Bones. Dozens of them. Arms, ribs, skulls. Emily's flashlight trembled as she realized they weren't animal remains. These were human. Daniel was crouched near the edge, brushing soil away from something half-buried, a small wooden box, rotted and warped. He opened it carefully, revealing a fragment of yellowed parchment inside, covered in looping handwriting. The ink had bled with age, but one phrase was still legible: keep it sealed. It knocks to be remembered. Before either could speak, a noise erupted from below the pit, 3 deafening knocks, echoing up through the hollow. Knock. 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 The ground beneath them shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling above, and Emily screamed for Daniel to climb out. As they scrambled up the ladder, the light flickered wildly, and she saw it, something pale and stretched, clawing its way up the stones, its hands long and thin like the ones on their window. They slammed the trapdoor shut and nailed it down again, the final echo of those knocks fading beneath their feet. For the rest of that day, neither Emily nor Daniel spoke much. The trapdoor was sealed again, this time with nails, furniture, and Daniel's toolbox stacked on top, but the house didn't feel safe anymore. The air felt charged, humming faintly as if the ground itself was breathing beneath their feet. Every sound made Emily flinch. The old walls creaked differently now, slower, deeper, like something heavy shifting inside them. Even Daniel, who tried to mask his fear with logic, seemed distant, his eyes darting toward the pantry whenever the wind changed. At dusk, the fog came earlier than usual. It rolled across the fields like a tide, pressing against the farmhouse windows. By nightfall, it was so thick that even the porch light couldn't cut through it. Emily stood by the window, watching, when she saw movement in the mist again, no, not one figure this time, but several. Shapes swaying in the fog, slow and deliberate, like a crowd gathering. Daniel, she whispered. He came beside her, his face draining of color. Through the glass, faint and distorted, they could hear it, a chorus of knocks. Knock. 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 Dozens of them, coming from all directions. The sound rolled across the fog, vibrating the walls, shaking the floorboards beneath their feet. They ran to the living room as the power went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The only light came from Daniel's flashlight, flickering weakly. Upstairs, he shouted, pulling Emily by the arm. The stairs groaned under their weight as they ran, the knocking growing louder, now joined by scraping sounds, something dragging along the exterior walls. In the hallway, Emily turned back just in time to see the trapdoor in the kitchen rise, the heavy toolbox sliding off as though lifted from beneath. She screamed. Daniel slammed the bedroom door behind them and shoved a dresser in front of it. The knocking didn't stop. It continued rhythmically, endlessly, on the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Every surface seemed alive with sound. Then came a voice, deep and gurgling, echoing through the air vents. You opened the door, now remember. The dresser began to rattle as though something were pushing against it. Daniel raised the flashlight toward the wall, and that's when they saw them, hands. Pale, skeletal hands pushing through the plaster like wet clay, fingers stretching outward, grasping at air. Emily backed against the far wall, trembling uncontrollably. We have to get out, she cried. Daniel tried to pry open the window, but the glass wouldn't break. The fog pressed against it like solid matter, sealing them in. Then, beneath the floorboards, the knocking stopped. Silence. For a brief, awful moment, the house went still. Then came a single, heavy thud from the hallway, followed by the slow drag of footsteps approaching the bedroom door. Whatever was outside was no longer knocking, it was walking. The dresser began to shift, inch by inch, as something pressed from the other side. Daniel tightened his grip on Emily's hand, whispering, when it stops moving, we run. But the door didn't stop moving. It breathed. The sound outside the door grew heavier, each step deliberate, slow, and filled with dreadful purpose. Emily clung to Daniel, feeling his heart pounding against her own. The dresser scraped forward another inch, pushed by something with immense strength. The flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, Emily heard it, breathing. Wet, shallow, and close. When the light came back, the door bulged inward, wood cracking under invisible hands. Run! Daniel yelled, grabbing her arm and yanking open the attic ladder. They climbed frantically as the bedroom door split open below them with a deafening crash. The attic air was freezing, heavy with dust and the faint metallic tang of blood. The flashlight's beam jittered as they crawled deeper into the shadows. Below, the house shook, footsteps moving room to room, searching. Emily covered her mouth to muffle her sobs. Then they both heard it again, that same deliberate rhythm echoing through the beams and walls, knock. 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 Except now it wasn't coming from the floors below, it was inside the attic with them. Daniel spun around, the beam slicing through the dust, and froze. In the far corner, something crouched. It wasn't quite human anymore, tall and gaunt, skin stretched tight over bone, its limbs far too long. Its face was nothing but a hollow cavity, where a mouth should have been, and its chest moved in jagged, shuddering breaths. When it lifted its head, the sound came from inside it, the same 3 knocks, echoing from its ribs like a drum. Knock. 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 Daniel raised the crowbar, trembling. "What do you want?" he shouted. The thing tilted its head, then spoke in a voice that made Emily's stomach drop, her own voice, "You let me out." The creature stepped forward, its form rippling like the fog outside. In its wake, the air shimmered, revealing faint outlines of others behind it, more figures, translucent and distorted, their hands pressed against the attic walls. They knocked in unison, a chorus of forgotten souls. Knock. 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 The noise became unbearable, shaking the rafters, splintering wood. Emily screamed as the flashlight shattered, plunging them into darkness. Daniel swung blindly, but the sound stopped all at once. Silence. Then a voice whispered directly into Emily's ear, cold and close, "Remember me." When she opened her eyes, it was daylight. The police stood in the kitchen, confused. The house was in shambles, furniture overturned, the trapdoor pried open again. Daniel was gone. They found only the crowbar lying beside the cellar hole, his flashlight still flickering beside it. No trace of him. Emily never returned to the farmhouse after that day. It was condemned a few months later, sealed and fenced off. But sometimes, when the fog settles over that stretch of road, locals claim they hear it coming from beneath the ground, 3 slow knocks echoing through the dirt, like a memory refusing to be buried.